What if I told you that fasting isn't just about skipping meals, but about unlocking something far greater? Spiritual clarity, divine encounters, and inner strength. Most people see fasting as a religious obligation or a test of endurance, but few truly understand its power. The truth is, fasting has shaped history, changed destinies, and even influenced the course of nations. Think about it. Elijah fasted for 40 days and 40 nights before receiving divine direction. Daniel fasted for 3 weeks, and God revealed deep mysteries to him. Israel fasted for 70 years, but many failed to grasp its true purpose. Fasting is not just an act of deprivation. It's a spiritual key that unlocks the supernatural. But here's the problem. Many people fast the wrong way. They treat it like a ritual, do it for social recognition, or enter into it without preparation. Worse yet, some fast but fail to connect with God, turning it into nothing more than self-discipline instead of spiritual transformation. Jesus himself warned about this in Matthew 6 verses 16 to 18, making it clear that fasting should be a personal and sacred act, not a performance for others. If done with the wrong mindset, fasting becomes meaningless. But when done correctly, it can change everything. So, what is the real power of fasting? How can it bring divine breakthroughs, clarity, and strength? And most importantly, what is the one thing you should never do while fasting if you want to attract God's presence? Stay with me because we're about to uncover the answers. Fasting has always been a powerful key for those seeking a deeper spiritual life. It's not just about abstaining from food. It's about making room for something greater. Since ancient times, figures like Elijah, who fasted 40 days and 40 nights before receiving divine revelation, understood that emptying the body could be a way to fill the soul. Martin Luther and Augustine also used this practice to gain spiritual clarity and connect with God on a more profound level. It's like turning off external noise to hear what truly matters. The truth is, in a world where everything moves too fast, taking the time to fast seems almost like a revolutionary act. But it's precisely this moment of pause that allows people to see beyond daily distractions. Daniel, for example, fasted for 3 weeks seeking divine revelation, and what he received was far beyond what he expected. He not only strengthened his faith, but also found answers to questions that seemed impossible to solve. It's like tuning an instrument. Without fine-tuning, the melody of spiritual life becomes distorted. Anyone who has ever experienced fasting knows that something changes deep inside. It's not just about feeling hunger. It's about realizing what truly nourishes the soul. For 70 years, Israel fasted without fully understanding the spiritual meaning behind the practice, proving that the act alone is not enough. Intention and surrender are essential. When one fasts with purpose, the mind clears, the heart aligns, and even difficult decisions become easier to make. After all, when the body's noise is reduced, God's voice becomes much clearer. Fasting is not just a personal choice. It is a deeply rooted biblical principle. In Matthew 6 verses 16 to 18, Jesus teaches that fasting should be an intimate practice, not something done for show. He warns against fasting to impress others, emphasizing that those who seek human recognition have already received their reward. Instead, true fasting is about connecting with God, not about displaying spirituality. Similarly, in Zechariah 7 verses 5 to 6, God questions Israel's fasting over 70 years, asking whether they were truly fasting for him or just following rituals. This serves as a powerful reminder that the intention behind fasting matters just as much as the act itself. Throughout history, many people have misunderstood the true purpose of fasting. Some see it as a religious obligation rather than a spiritual discipline. Take the Pharisees, for example. They fasted, but their hearts were not in the right place. They did it for status, not for God. In contrast, figures like Daniel, who fasted for 3 weeks to seek divine understanding, showed what true fasting looks like. His story illustrates that fasting is not about deprivation but about seeking revelation. When done correctly, fasting creates space for God to speak, rather than becoming a hollow tradition. The Bible is full of examples of fasting as a transformative practice. Jesus himself fasted for 40 days and 40 nights before beginning his ministry, demonstrating its power in preparing the soul for great challenges. Elijah did the same, relying on fasting to receive divine guidance. These stories reveal that fasting has always been a way to sharpen spiritual focus, strip away distractions, and align oneself with God's will. When viewed through this biblical lens, fasting is not just an ancient custom but a living, powerful act of faith. Fasting serves multiple spiritual purposes, and different Christian traditions interpret its significance in various ways. Some view it as a form of spiritual cleansing, a way to detach from worldly distractions and refocus on God. Others see it as preparation for significant events, just as Jesus fasted 40 days and 40 nights before starting his ministry. Still, many practice fasting as an act of humility and dependence on God, a reminder that spiritual nourishment is far more essential than physical sustenance. Regardless of the approach, the common thread is that fasting is a tool for realignment, a spiritual reset to bring one closer to divine wisdom. Beyond its spiritual benefits, fasting has a profound impact on personal transformation. Daniel, for instance, fasted for 3 weeks while seeking divine guidance, and his commitment led to extraordinary revelations. His story underscores the idea that fasting can sharpen discernment, enabling believers to see things from a higher perspective. It's not just about denying the body food, it's about feeding the spirit. Imagine taking a break from social media, excessive entertainment, or negative influences. The clarity and peace that emerge are a glimpse of what fasting from food can bring to one's relationship with God. Fasting is also a test of faith and commitment. Israel fasted for 70 years, yet many failed to grasp its deeper meaning because they treated it as an empty ritual rather than a heartfelt pursuit of God. The lesson here is clear. Fasting without intention is like sailing without a destination. When done with purpose, fasting becomes a powerful act of surrender, an expression of trust in God's provision. It teaches patience, discipline, and the importance of aligning one's desires with divine will. Ultimately, fasting is not about what is given up, but about what is gained: clarity, strength, and a closer walk with God. Starting a fast can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. The key is to begin with small, intentional steps. One effective approach is skipping a single meal and using that time for prayer and Bible study. Just as Daniel fasted for 3 weeks to seek clarity from God, one can dedicate even a short fast to focusing on spiritual growth. The goal isn't just to avoid food, but to replace physical nourishment with deeper communion with God. Instead of scrolling through social media during mealtime, one could read Matthew 6 verses 16 to 18, meditate on God's presence, or pray about a specific concern. As with anything worthwhile, preparation is crucial. Jumping into a 40-day and 40-night fast without experience is like trying to run a marathon without training. A gradual approach, such as fasting for a few hours or a single day, helps the body and mind adjust. Drinking water, avoiding distractions, and setting clear intentions can make the process smoother. More importantly, one must remember why they are fasting. If the focus remains on God rather than on hunger or discomfort, the experience becomes more enriching. Fasting isn't about suffering, it's about refining one's spiritual sensitivity. Another important factor is knowing when and how to end the fast. Israel fasted for 70 years, yet many didn't fully understand its purpose. This highlights the importance of reflection during and after fasting. Once the fast is over, take a moment to process the experience. What did God reveal? What habits or distractions became clearer? How did faith grow in the process? Fasting isn't just an event. It's a journey that deepens understanding, strengthens discipline, and draws one closer to God's voice. By starting small and staying consistent, anyone can make fasting a powerful part of their spiritual life. Fasting is a powerful reminder of what truly matters. In a world where convenience and instant gratification reign, choosing to go without food, even for a short time, feels counterintuitive. But that's precisely the point. When Daniel fasted for 3 weeks, he wasn't just giving up rich foods. He was shifting his focus from earthly indulgence to divine revelation. Fasting teaches that abundance isn't about how much we have, but about how deeply we trust in God's provision. It strips away distractions, allowing us to realize that real satisfaction comes not from physical fullness, but from spiritual fulfillment. Modern life bombards us with messages that more is always better. More money, more food, more entertainment. Yet history proves otherwise. Israel fasted for 70 years, but many did so without fully understanding its meaning. They were caught up in routine, missing the opportunity to transform spiritually. This mirrors the way people today consume endlessly, chasing happiness in material things while feeling spiritually empty. Fasting disrupts this cycle, forcing a shift in priorities. Instead of seeking temporary pleasures, it encourages reliance on God's abundance, which is far greater than anything money can buy. Fasting also reveals how much we take for granted. Jesus fasted 40 days and 40 nights, fully embracing human vulnerability while depending on the Father. When we fast, even for a short period, we gain a fresh perspective on gratitude. What once seemed ordinary, a simple meal, a sip of water, becomes something to cherish. More importantly, fasting helps break unhealthy attachments. Whether it's food, technology, or social validation, we begin to see what truly controls us. And in that realization, there is freedom, the kind that only comes when we let go and trust that God alone is enough. One of the biggest mistakes people make when fasting is turning it into a performance. Jesus warned about this in Matthew 6 verses 16 to 18, saying that those who fast to be seen by others have already received their reward. Fasting is meant to be an intimate act of devotion, not a social display. The Pharisees, for example, used fasting as a way to appear more spiritual, but their hearts were far from God. In contrast, Daniel fasted for 3 weeks in private, seeking revelation, not recognition. True fasting isn't about proving piety. It's about drawing closer to God in humility. Another common mistake is treating fasting as a mere religious obligation. Israel fasted for 70 years, yet many did so without grasping its purpose. They went through the motions but failed to engage their hearts. Fasting without sincerity is like a diet with no discipline. It may look impressive on the surface, but it lacks substance. If the focus is only on avoiding food rather than seeking God, then the fast loses its power. Instead, fasting should be approached with intention, reflection, and a genuine desire for spiritual growth. Lastly, one should never neglect their physical and spiritual well-being during a fast. Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, but he did so in full alignment with the Father's will. If someone fasts recklessly, ignoring their health, or enters a fast without prayer and guidance, it can become more harmful than helpful. A fast should not lead to exhaustion or frustration, but to renewal and clarity. The goal isn't to punish the body, it's to refine the soul. When done with the right mindset, fasting becomes a transformative experience, deepening faith and strengthening one's dependence on God. History is filled with examples of people who fasted in pursuit of divine intervention. Take Hannah, for instance. She fasted and prayed fervently for a child, and God answered her with the birth of Samuel, 1 Samuel 1 verses 11 to 15. Her story highlights how fasting can be an act of surrender, trusting that God hears the cries of his people. Another example is Elijah, who fasted for 40 days and 40 nights before encountering God's guidance, 1 Kings 19 verses 8 to 12. These stories show that fasting has never been about deprivation. It's about positioning oneself to receive greater clarity and wisdom from above. The city of Nineveh presents a striking contrast. When Jonah warned them of impending destruction, the entire city, men, women, and even animals, fasted in repentance. Their collective humility led to God's mercy, proving that fasting can shift the course of history. Similarly, Daniel fasted for 3 weeks, seeking revelation, and his obedience unlocked profound spiritual insight. These examples demonstrate that fasting is a gateway to transformation, whether personal or communal. It's a reminder that, throughout the ages, those who truly humbled themselves before God were met with divine favor. However, fasting alone is not enough. Israel fasted for 70 years, but as Zechariah 7 verses 5 to 6 reveals, many did so without understanding its true purpose. Their fasting became a routine rather than a heartfelt pursuit of God. This serves as a warning. Fasting should never become an empty ritual. It is meant to be a sincere act of faith, aligning the heart with God's will. Those who fast with the right intention, as seen throughout biblical history, experience breakthroughs that go beyond human comprehension. The question is, are we fasting for transformation or just following tradition? Fasting is more than just an act of devotion. It's a battleground. When Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, he was immediately confronted by Satan, proving that fasting often attracts spiritual warfare. It strips away distractions and forces one to rely solely on God. This is why fasting is so powerful. It weakens the flesh but strengthens the spirit. Daniel, too, fasted for 3 weeks, seeking divine revelation, and during this time, unseen spiritual battles were taking place. Daniel 10 verses 12 to 13. Fasting is not just about what happens in the natural world, but about what is shifting in the spiritual realm. Throughout history, fasting has been a weapon used to break strongholds. The Ninevites fasted, and God spared them from destruction. Esther fasted before risking her life to save her people, and victory followed. When Israel fasted for 70 years, some did so without understanding, missing the opportunity for true transformation. But when fasting is done with purpose and faith, it becomes a means of shaking the heavens. It's no coincidence that in moments of crisis or major decisions, biblical figures turn to fasting. It is a direct way to silence the noise of the world and amplify the voice of God. However, fasting is not just about resisting external opposition. It's also about overcoming inner struggles. It forces one to confront pride, impatience, and reliance on material things. The battle isn't just against outside forces, but against the self. Fasting is like sharpening a sword, removing impurities so that one is prepared for battle. Those who commit to fasting with the right mindset step into a realm of spiritual authority and deeper connection with God. But the real test is, will they continue the fight beyond the fast? Fasting is often seen as a personal practice, but its effects extend far beyond the individual. In Isaiah 58, God makes it clear that true fasting is not just about abstaining from food, but about bringing justice, breaking oppression, and helping those in need. It's about feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. When fasting is done with a heart for others, it becomes a catalyst for real change. Daniel fasted for 3 weeks, not just for himself but for the revelation of God's will. Likewise, when people fast with a sense of purpose, entire communities can experience transformation. Historically, fasting has led to significant social movements and breakthroughs. In Nineveh, the entire city fasted, and God spared them from destruction. When Israel fasted for 70 years, many did so without understanding, missing the greater call to action. But fasting, when combined with a desire for justice, becomes a force that cannot be ignored. Imagine a world where fasting was not just about personal breakthroughs, but about interceding for the broken, the lost, and the oppressed. When people fast not just for their own needs but for the well-being of others, they engage in one of the most powerful acts of spiritual warfare. Even today, fasting can be used as a tool to shift societies. Churches and communities that come together in fasting see changes beyond what human effort alone can accomplish. Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, preparing for a mission that would change the course of history. What if fasting was embraced not just as an individual discipline but as a collective movement? The potential for impact is limitless. The question remains, how can fasting go beyond personal devotion and become a vehicle for lasting transformation in the world? Fasting isn't a one-size-fits-all practice. There are different ways to fast, each serving a unique purpose. Absolute fasting, where no food or water is consumed, is the most intense and should be done cautiously. It was practiced by figures like Moses and Esther during times of extreme need. Partial fasting, like Daniel's 3-week fast, involves abstaining from certain foods while focusing on prayer and seeking God. This type is ideal for those looking to maintain energy while dedicating themselves spiritually. Then there's spiritual fasting, where one gives up distractions like social media, entertainment, or technology to focus solely on God. Each type of fasting aligns with a different season in life. When Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, it was in preparation for his ministry. Some fast for breakthrough, others for guidance, and some as an act of repentance, much like the people of Nineveh. Israel fasted for 70 years, yet many did so without understanding. This highlights that fasting is more than what is given up. It's about the heart behind it. A fast without intention is just a diet. But when done with purpose, any type of fasting can lead to deeper spiritual growth and revelation. Choosing the right fast depends on personal circumstances and spiritual goals. For beginners, skipping one meal and using that time for prayer can be a great starting point. For those seeking clarity, a Daniel fast might be more suitable. If the goal is breaking free from distractions, a digital fast, stepping away from screens and social media, can be just as powerful. The method matters less than the motive. The key is consistency and a genuine desire to draw closer to God. So, which fast would best serve your current spiritual journey? Fasting is not just about giving something up. It's about gaining something far greater: clarity, discipline, and spiritual renewal. When Daniel fasted for 3 weeks, he wasn't just seeking answers. He was refining his ability to hear God. Fasting sharpens the mind, making it easier to focus on what truly matters. It builds resilience, teaching self-control in a world that constantly demands indulgence. When Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, he demonstrated that spiritual strength is cultivated not by feeding the body, but by feeding the soul. True fasting shifts the perspective from physical needs to divine provision. On an emotional level, fasting brings inner peace. Many people feel overwhelmed by the noise of life. Endless notifications, stress, and expectations. Fasting, whether from food or distractions, forces a reset. Israel fasted for 70 years, yet many missed the true purpose because they treated it as a ritual rather than an opportunity for transformation. When fasting is approached with the right mindset, it becomes a healing process, releasing anxiety and strengthening faith. It's like stepping away from the chaos and entering into a sacred space where only God's voice matters. Fasting also deepens gratitude. Going without something, even temporarily, makes one appreciate it more. A simple meal after a fast is no longer ordinary. It's a blessing. More importantly, fasting reveals how much one depends on external comforts. If going a few hours without food is challenging, what does that say about dependence on material things? This awareness leads to true freedom. Fasting isn't just about withholding. It's about realigning priorities, strengthening faith, and stepping into a deeper understanding of God's sufficiency. So, what will your next fast reveal about your faith? Fasting isn't just an ancient practice. It's a spiritual game changer. It's the difference between wandering aimlessly and walking in divine purpose. It's what took Elijah from exhaustion to revelation in 40 days and 40 nights, what gave Daniel clarity after 3 weeks of seeking God, and what could have transformed Israel's 70 years of fasting, if only they had understood its true meaning. But here's the real question. Are you just learning about fasting, or are you ready to experience its power? Imagine what could shift in your life if you committed to fasting with the right heart. What burdens could be lifted? What prayers could be answered? What distractions could finally be silenced so you could hear God's voice clearly? The reality is, most people never experience the full power of fasting because they either avoid it or approach it incorrectly. But now you know better. You know what fasting truly means, why it matters, and most importantly, what you must never do while fasting. The next step is yours. So here's my challenge to you: commit to a fast. Maybe it's skipping a meal to pray, trying a Daniel fast for deeper focus, or even stepping into a full fast for spiritual breakthrough. But don't just think about it. Act on it. And if you want to keep learning and growing spiritually, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and stay connected. Because this is just the beginning of what God wants to reveal to you. Are you ready? Let's go.